This session is more focused on sharing some insights that we got from doing a survey of just over 1,000 manufacturers. Actually, it was fielded in November, December, so it's very fresh data that we'll be publishing soon, as in the next few weeks. So we'll provide general access to that, but if you see some things that you'd like to dig deeper into, reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or through the forum, and I can get you early access to that. But we'll jump in. I've also got AJ Madwesh joining me from Uptake, one of our partners. He's going to give you his take, no pun intended, on a couple of the results of the survey, and then we'll open it up, right? Because I don't think we're necessarily going to talk for 45 minutes. I do have some Microsoft colleagues in the room, so if we get questions that I can't deal with, then hopefully I've got a Microsoft expert on one or more of the topics in the room, and we can respond to that. But kind of jumping straight in, because I think we're on more or less on time. I just shared with you that we kind of took a deep dive into what is I think Greg Gorbach here calls it the midlife crisis, right? Where are people on their digital transformation journeys? And we really wanted to dig deep into the factory in particular. Back in August, we published the IoT Signals Report, which was a study of 500 manufacturers, where we kind of looked across the whole value chain. What are they doing in connected products? What are they doing in the service area? What are they doing in terms of supply chain? So we kind of fielded that research, but then we wanted to go a bit deeper into the factory specifically, as probably the most challenging area to really kind of drive digitalization at scale. And I'm going to share a couple of high-level just what we saw as kind of key differences by region and also by role. And in our case, it wasn't just IT and OT. We actually also looked at, I hate to say ET, but hopefully you know what I mean. It's kind of the engineering or innovation folks in the organization. So I'll kind of show you the different highlights of how they responded differently to this survey. It was still a factory BDM audience, so it was all about factory, but there was those three different roles that kind of responded to the survey. 1,024 manufacturers, roughly 50% of the respondents were in the technically OT. They were the factory respondents. About a quarter were IT, and the other quarter was that engineering or CTO type audience. And then geographically, it was roughly third. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that's laid out in the report. But here's some of the key differences that we kind of saw across the different regions. You'll kind of see that in North America, we've broken it out into kind of how they responded and what their key priorities were. We also looked at how they felt about the impact of those early investments in their digitalization. And then we also looked at what did they really want in terms of extra capability, or what did they need from, and who did they need it from in terms of industry partners. So we asked them, are you going to get it from your hyperscaler? I think a lot of people tend to think of Microsoft as a hyperscaler, although we also have business apps, business, and other components. So there was a hyperscaler kind of group, and they think that's who's going to help them the most. There was another group that really, where it was ISVs, so manufacturing ISVs, and then some responded that it was in industrial automation. So we kind of gave them all the different partners that they typically would be working with to see which of them they really saw contributing the most now and 3 years from now. So I can't dig into all of that in the next 45 minutes, but we'll do a kind of a quick orientation, and then hopefully you'll see enough that you'll download the report or ping me with questions, and I can get you access to the full report. I started saying in North America, there's a little bit of narrative on the slide, which may not be too flattering, but we did kind of see North America as maybe a little bit of a laggard in terms of their sustainability investments. You'll kind of see Asia Pacific, if you look to the far right-hand side of the screen here, that they were the most advanced, at least in terms of, obviously it's the survey respondents. We can't go and validate that they're responding accurately, but you will see that they were the ones that claimed to be furthest ahead in terms of how they were executing on their sustainability action plan, specifically in the factory. Remember, this is all questions about their factory and are they starting to track what's going on and do they have clear targets and goals in the factory. You'll kind of see Europe was somewhere in the middle in terms of establishing their emissions and energy targets. If you look at Europe, if I had to look at where are they a little bit further behind, then you'll kind of see that a lot of them, just in general, they seem to be a little bit further behind than both North America and Asia Pacific respondents in terms of how far they're into their digital transformation journeys. Obviously, we've all got customer examples we can give that probably negate that and say particular companies are further ahead. If you look at industrial metaverse, I sat through a metaverse session a little bit earlier on, which was really a great session. But you'll see in Europe, they really aren't really talking a lot about metaverse yet, or at least they haven't got to the point of action in terms of their industrial metaverse strategies. What else do we have in here? Asia Pacific, I think, interesting enough, even though they think they're ahead on sustainability, you'll see that they are the first, or the ones that are most likely to tell us that they are facing significant challenges on their digital transformation journey. So that may be experience, it may be the particular ecosystem that they're dealing with, it could be cultural. I haven't had enough time to dig into it to really understand why that's quite so different. And then if we kind of look at what may be more interesting to many people in the room, these are just kind of deeper dives into each of the regions, and I'll make these available. If you look at the three roles that we kind of really looked at, there's some interesting highlights here, and I think you're going to dig deeper into some of this as well, AJ. So I'll try not to steal any of your thunder there, but just big picture-wise, there was a lot of shared recognition of priorities, but you'll actually see there's a clear OT IT gap or misalignment in a lot of areas. We'll go much deeper into that with AJ, and happy to take questions on that. But you'll kind of see, not surprisingly, OT is probably, if I had to characterize it generally, and I think intuitively we all would probably intuitively say this, right? Which is they understand the domain, right? And they understand the challenges. So they're more clear on, no, we're not ready to move to all our workloads to the cloud. Whereas you'll see, or if they are going to move it to the cloud, and we have a lot of deep analysis of this in the report, they're more willing to consider moving to a private cloud than a public cloud. Whereas IT has a lot more comfort and expectation that many of these workloads will move to a public cloud. And that's almost a pattern you see on every application and every area that we ask in the report. Some subtle differences, but for the most part, you see the same pattern, that really OT wants to keep it take advantage of the cloud, but make sure it's secure, and they have more confidence in a private cloud approach, whereas IT responds that, we have lots of experience with enterprise applications, et cetera, being able to run on the public cloud, and we're more comfortable moving there. So that comes out loud and clear in the report. Some interesting differences across the board beyond that kind of generalized statement. If you look at operational technology, or much of the audience in the room, really, and it's a key theme of this conference, right? The whole first day was workshops on security, right? And so, interesting enough, when you look at OT, they really want, whoever they're getting it from, and the clear answer is they're getting it from an ecosystem, not one vendor, then really they want whatever platform they're either building themselves or the tools that they're using to build out that platform, they want integrated security. So they really don't want to have to carry the whole load on tackling the security problem. They want help from their vendor. So that's, I think, one key finding and challenge to us as technology providers. The good news is IT has 3 and 5, as you'll see there, are really saying that they're getting great returns. I think when we opened up, I think it was my colleague, wasn't it? Gabriel from ZF was kind of telling you, maybe don't think 20% a year ROI, but generally, as you can see here, 3 and 5 are saying they're getting good returns, however that's measured, particularly in terms of improved quality. And that's one of the most common use cases and still one of the highest priorities we see from OT, is really improving quality and applying technology to help with that effort. Almost across the board, you'll see technical. I think you're going to jump into that one, so maybe I'll just give that a light touch. But innovation, industry experience, again, it doesn't matter whether you're talking to your hyperscaler or an ISV, that was one of the highest priorities when you're really looking at that. You don't want to have to teach them manufacturing and teach them the whole manufacturing domain. So that was key when you're looking at who you're going to work with. Interestingly, engineering, and I think it's at the top for a reason, it was kind of, everyone responded that they want that integration with standard productivity and collaboration tools, right? Which was kind of an interesting finding for us, obviously, as a provider of some of that capability. But engineering in particular, and it may be because of their experience kind of doing collaboration, team collaboration around things like with PLM and product design. So maybe that's what kind of tainted that response, or made it a little bit higher in the terms of engineering. But I think those are just a few of the highlights I wanted to pop out. I won't open it for questions just yet. I want to get AJ started on some of the deeper findings on, when we talk about factory, what were we asking about? What were the specific capabilities and technologies? So if you want to take over on that, then we can start to open it up for questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Colin. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to all these charts. Obviously you'll find, I went through the draft version of it. I think the final version is pretty close to the draft version. There's some really interesting findings. And as I started to think about my own clients, we operate in Asia Pac, we operate in Europe, we operate in the US. There was quite a bit of thematics that I picked up on. So I just wanted to pass on some of my thoughts. I'll give you some examples of some of those learnings that we've had, or how it correlates to the information that we saw on the charts. To the far left, you're saying a kind of a strategy discussion. What is the strategy? How far along are the 1,024 different people, different executives, down in the trenches people, how they think of the strategy part of it. So you'll see what's interesting, what the chart is simply saying is that the deep gray is people who have not done anything yet. The light gray is something that people have thought about it, or doing something about it. The deep blue is something that they've started on. They've not gotten to the end point yet. And the light blue is where they believe they've fully implemented that. And that's actually, as you think about your own customers, or if you're a customer, you see yourself in that journey somewhere. There are people who are optimistic who feel that they've achieved a level of success that they would call themselves as fully implemented. So as an example, the chart to the right that you see, we've always talked about, I think anyone who's a vendor or who's been in this business, I've been in this business for 33 years, you've always heard of these silos, right? There are silos that are between the OT and the IT, and we have to bridge the OT plus IT. You'll see that the survey will tell you that we still have work to do. All of us have still work to do to get to the OT plus IT. And that's what the survey is saying there. So if you drill down into the details of the survey itself, the 4 items at the bottom is what I will just highlight about. There's a recognition of the data strategies that are different for OT and IT, or OT and non-OT, I would say. Meaning that one is the data types are different, how data is consumed is different, time factor comes into the picture. All of us know that. On the IT side, till you get to transactional processing, time is not as material, but tends to be important in there as well. So we still have work to do on the 2 segments that don't seem to be meeting each other yet. And companies like Microsoft are trying to bridge that gap for us, providing an ecosystem of partners. The other thing is the data models. You'll see that in the next chart, you'll see how data models and the views of the IT strategy, engineering, and the OT people is so different. And that's I think all of us have encountered some discussion about data models, and we all think we have really nailed this down, till we get to the point in front of a customer or we are trying to implement it and we say, oh my God, this is different. I need to do something more. The expertise, with the injection of cloud into the mix, the technologies now are quite different. If I put myself back about even 6 years ago, the kind of discussions we would have with clients was quite different from even now. So today it is very important to contextualize everything around cloud as one of those integration principles. You have to be able to talk about SaaS, non-SaaS. There are people still asking about on-premise. So when I talk to my clients in Asia Pac, there's this one customer that I had pretty extensive discussions over late nights, over multiple months. The general manager of that business unit wanted absolute total details about every machine learning model that they have that we can use, or the ones that we build. How can they use that? But they had not even had a cloud strategy defined yet. So they didn't have Azure running yet, even though that was a standardization. So it's like you'll see some of those discrepancies show up in the survey as well. Last but not least, some of our customers, the way they've achieved success is from an organization perspective, even though there are chief analytics officers, digital transformation officers, and so on and so forth, it still comes down to some catalyst within their organization who can bring pieces together, who can go work across different business units, connect them, bring the vision to all of them. And that's been a key success factor in such cases. So some interesting takeaways there. This is the next slide this is the last slide. So after this, you'll get to call in all the questions. I'll just sit there. And here's the interesting part. This is the discussion about the cloud partner, the bridge that connects all of us together. Just look at the gray bars. and the two blue bars, see how there's a discrepancy between what the operations thinks versus what the IT and strategy thinks. So the light blue is IT plus strategy. Deep blue is engineering and innovation. So this is where I say I think we still have work to do on how to bring all of these pieces together yet, because there is a need within the operations that is still being said in multiple ways. One way is through the survey. So I say that the OT-IT integration is work in progress. It's not defined yet. It's not complete yet. And it's not just technology. There's something else there. There is the operations people. We refer to the experts as SMEs. So there are SMEs. We need SMEs in this area. I think there's a bit more to that, but there's a sense of confidence that they get when you speak, when a person who knows the domain speaks to them about why they should go on a certain strategy or a trajectory. So that still is an important need. I think what we are also seeing in the market is the need for a very strong partnership. We all talk about competitors. I'm a product company. I run the global operations for products. But I think part of our strategy is to find everyone, whether there's overlaps in products or not, to find a way to build solutions for our clients. And that's, I think, an important aspect that comes out of survey, just based on a few of these charts there. And the last one, this is the kind of holy grail, I wanted to put that in there, is this immense need to do zero code, no code, low code. So the operations team or the operations people care much about that. All our, technical geeks are like, well, what the heck, it's very easy, we can do that. But that's not how they think about it. They have a business to run. Their view is code is something that supports their business. Code is not the most important thing, unlike some of us, but it's like that. So it's something to think about for us, that the survey is very impactful in my mind. Survey was very well done. It's very broad. Asia Pacific covers the globe, a variety of different people. So my simple plug to all of you, even though I won't make any money on it, is to get that survey through Colin.
So I think if you sat through the keynote, hopefully you enjoyed the panel discussion, and particularly Gabriel kind of talking about what he was doing from a digital transformation perspective. And I think during the panel discussion, we talked about a few of these topics. We talked a little bit about what they were doing with low code, no code, and kind of enabling their whole organization, including the factory people. And so ZF was kind of one of the companies I look at that's probably on the leading edge of that in terms of really giving access to all of their workforce, not just access to classic office type tools, but actually this low code, no code platform. So that's one of the things I would probably pick out of this, that we're starting to see low code, no code not just be an IT topic, but something that at least some of the leading manufacturers that we're talking to are really starting to look at. How do I tap into the fact that I've got these skills gap, and the people that have the skills need to be those that actually help us get these next generation manufacturing applications into use as quickly as possible. So it partially addresses the IT-OT gap, and so I think that's something worth digging deeper into. We will make the full report available. It was just purely timing. It was otherwise I would have been making it available for you to do your own analysis this week, but it'll take another week or two before we publish that online. But if any of you have real urgency in seeing that, then reach out to us. But what we really wanted to hear was, does this resonate? Is there any of you in the room, and I'm thinking more manufacturers than the technology providers in the room, that really want to to share in terms of where you are on your digital transformation journey, or what are the blockers to making progress in your case? Or we've got a number of Microsoft people in the room, and AJ and his team. I think is it Alvaro? Did I get his name right?
Yeah, Alvaro, yeah.
Yeah, is in the room. So happy to take any questions at this point, or volunteers just to tell us what you're doing.
There's a hand that was raised there, back there.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the survey itself.
Yep.
So can you tell me a little bit about what industry sectors, and did you parse the data based on that, and did you see maturity differences?
We haven't done a lot of the breakouts yet by industry, but it was broader view of manufacturing, right? It was kind of, we had auto, we had semi, we had chemical, pharma. I think we deliberately kept it back a little bit on the energy side. We didn't want it to get too skewed by energy and utilities, but there is, I think, about a 10% in that space.
And some of the demographics included the size of the companies. There were some that were really small to really large. So I think it represents a pretty good mix that way.
I think there's a lot more slice and dice we can do on it, because I think we always ask about company size and number of employees, but we also, this time, we asked about if you're responding and you only have one factory, then maybe you're not dealing with all the same scale-out problems, right? So we did ask whether you were running one, somewhere between 1 and 10, or up to, I think we went as far as over 200 factories. We didn't think there was much point in asking. If you already had 200 factories, it probably wasn't very different above that. But yeah, what industry are you particularly interested in?
I'm interested in just kind of understanding how all the maturity is different and the reasons why.
Yeah, we haven't had time to do that. I think we may still have to do a few buckets. All right, 1,024 is a good size, right? Yeah. But it may not be enough to go really sub-vertical, but we should be able to do some analysis of that.
You just often hear how some industries are more ahead, and when you talk to people, they're having the same problems, so it's just kind of interesting seeing across different industries and how.
Yeah, and I guess mentally.
A lot of the same challenges, regardless of how mature people are, and even thinking about like a plant within an ecosystem, working with CMOs and suppliers, and so you have this ecosystem problem in all industries, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of a similar challenge.
Yeah, I think you bring up interesting points, right? Automotive, you've got relatively concentrated power there, right, between the OEMs and the tier one, and then when you look at, and energy has a bit of that characteristic as well. But we haven't had time to look at all those cuts, but it could also be region, right, because a lot of high tech in APAC, and maybe that's why we were seeing some of those different responses. So a lot of opportunity to, I have a lot of work to do, thanks. All right.
Let me a little bit be what is called controversial here. Years ago, when Microsoft introduced Windows 95, we actually were an OT conference, and then what we're talking about is the OT and IT integration. It's still a work in progress. We talked about SQL databases, ODBC, and all that sort of things. Mm-hmm. I think what we are now, 25 years later, we're still talking about the same picture, same gap. Is it not time just to say, you know what, we push it, this is something we're talking about, but it's actually nobody wants? The OT guys really don't want IT guys in their space. Mm-hmm. We give them the data. So instead of OT, IT conversions, we actually let's split this thing up and just make sure they get access to all the data, but let them stay out of our space, out of the OT space. Mm-hmm. Get over with it and let the experts on OT talk about OT and IT about IT. Is that not actually, after 30 years trying to push this thing together, it feels like we're trying to date the wrong people.
Can I ask where you're from?
Where I'm from?
Yeah. You
I'm originally from the Netherlands.
No, which company or which?
Oh no, yeah. So Oh, I work for Red Lion Controls. We actually are an industrial data company. But before that, I was a long time in the whole HMI industry, industrial automation,
Right,
long
right.
time GE, where we actually were pushing this story for as long as I know it, correct?
look,
and we made a lot of progress, but the reality is that picture you show with the gap in between, that is the same picture we showed 25 years ago, correct? And so we need to solve this problem. And we're going to
Just
solve
to be
this
fair.
problem, and we're still solving the problem. So
That graphic is mine, so it is not in survey. Please
No,
don't expect
but
that in survey.
it's better looking now.
I see. Thank you so much for that. But your point is valid in one way, in that we may never get to a point where the OT and IT are so, kumbaya with each other at some point. I think there'll be a structural separation that always will prevent for the full OT-IT integration. But it is a lot closer than where it was. I'm sure you'll say that SQL database versus time series columnar database are now, at least there's a progression towards the kind of the new technology. I mean, I think as you step back at a broader level, I think the recognition of that is much stronger now than I would say 30 years ago. The recognition that ultimately business problems can be solved with a plurality of data, and when that data is quality enough, that we can do that. And I think to me that the work in progress is to get us to that point where that data is not as hard to get to.
And I think looking at the high-level data, you don't think it's changed much, but once you dig into the data, and you'll see a lot of alignment between IT and OT, and then you'll see these areas where we still have a lot of work to do. And I've got as much gray hair, maybe more gray hair than you. But so there's not a lot new. I mean, I find myself talking about metaverse, but when I really unpack metaverse, it's all things that we've been doing for a few years. I mean, digital twins and digital threads are not new. So that in itself doesn't mean there's not an opportunity to, for example, drive more investment in the right areas if you use the right language and you can connect with across the different audiences because you use that to your advantage, right? So I'm not going to apologize for the fact that we haven't solved the problem. It's not uniquely Microsoft's to solve, right? It's just a reflection of where there are still gaps and where if we can apply technology like baking security in, working with our ecosystem to deliver more intelligent apps so that doesn't all fall on or basically falls between IT and OT and never gets addressed. That's kind of what we're trying to do with it. Look at where there is still that gap and we can do things to actually either fill and address that gap by building some of the capabilities in on these things that need alignment between IT and OT, or work with the partner ecosystem to make sure that we're helping address that. So I'm not going to apologize for the fact that Microsoft hasn't fixed that problem, right? So, but good perspective, a good reminder that what's old is new again. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Richard Rolke from Dow Chemical. And one comment and one question, but I guess I'd start with the comment part to address kind of what was mentioned a minute ago. Now, I've only been in this space for about 5 years, definitely on the OT side, by the way.
All right.
But I can tell you in the last 5 years, I have seen there is definitely still a gap, absolutely, but that gap is much, much smaller. And I think that what is changing is the knowledge base on both sides, right? So it used to be on the OT side, we didn't know anything about the IT side. Right, that is not the case anymore. Like, my knowledge base is much greater. Many of the people that I work with in the operations side, their knowledge base is much, much greater now. So I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that there isn't that hard divide that there used to be between.
Right.
Now, obviously, you got some in the IT space that know nothing about operations, and the reverse. But you do have a a pretty good middle segment there that I
Yep.
think can overlap both ways. And I think
That's great.
that is what's going to bring that gap eventually closer.
That's great perspective. Thanks.
The other question I had was around, it's more perspective on from your standpoint is, and one of the keynotes mentioned, basically benefits being overpromised
Yep.
and underdelivered, or you could say maybe underimplemented. But I'd be curious to know, because having been in the OT space and implemented a lot of these opportunities that looked really good and were promised or suggested they were going to be, let's just say 20%, because that number was thrown out there. And what we've actually seen is probably closer to single digits.
I think that's what ZF said. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are there. What's being missed? Are we both too aggressive on both sides, or just curious your perspective there?
Sure, I'll address. My perspective is we work with a lot of companies that, and you've probably heard this phrase this week, kind of pilot purgatory, or I don't quite view it that way. I view it as there are still challenges because there is so much heterogeneity in our OT landscape. So even if you get it right, and I think Gabriel kind of addressed this a little bit in his keynote, which is, you work out how to do this in one factory, and you'd like to think you can just pick it up and scale it out, but every one is a little bit different. So I see it's more that's the chasm that everyone is trying to cross, right? Is how do I've proven it works and I've got maybe single-digit returns, but if I could rapidly scale that out, then I might be able to realize those kind of double-digit returns because I got some kind of sharing or repeatability. And that's the blocker, and in some respects that's what we were trying to identify. And this is our only mechanism, right? Obviously, we talk a lot to our customers and take a lot of feedback from customers, but we were looking for those opportunities. How do we make it easier for our partners as well? Because they give us that feedback as well. Hey, I can't just take this stuff and templatize it and roll it out to the next factory. How do we crack that code of shared information models and kind of move them and call out to John Dake and SESME and all the work they're doing on information models and OPC, right? Because that's way overdue, right? I mean, we have to keep, it's hard work, but we have to keep plugging away at that if we're going to see these double-digit returns. We're all trying to solve very similar problems. It's just the actual implementation gets blocked by, I've got 50 different, in some cases, hundreds of different manufacturing systems and protocols, and that came out loud and clear in this as well, that I think information models, and it was interesting, it was engineering that had the most positive response in terms of they really want more consideration of information models when they are designing and implementing new factories or extensions to factories. Anyway, that was a long-winded response. You may have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, so the one of the issues with knowing what the returns are and you chart a path towards gaining those returns is also that what we've seen is that only some companies keep the pedal fully pressed down to gain the full results. Sometimes they lose that. The momentum that starts off is not as strong towards the finish. So it like, if you think of use cases, suppose they start off with these 5 use cases. Asset performance is key to me, unplanned downtime is key to me. So as they go almost to the point that Colin made, they start off with a plant A, and then as they go to plant B, plant C, plant D, with the variations, they become harder and harder to achieve those same results. So in an idealized version, you're taking all the plants to be equal or in some normalized form, and the outcome that comes from each of those plants may end up being different. So the aggregate performance of what you wanted to achieve to what you actually achieved can be quite different because of that. But it is also as a product vendor and having been in this industry for many years, it's also a function of the products. Products are always, evolving too. So the evolution of the product has to be taken into consideration as you go through your process. And, ultimately those returns are there. They just are not getting realized quickly yet. That's my view.
Did we answer your question? Okay. Anyone else?
We must be really good, Colin.
No, I don't.
So I think we've
not sure
completely
that's it.
floored all of them.
They're too shy, right? So there's one over that side and one over that side.
So you just used two of my favorite words, which are sort of evolution and realization. So I actually wonder, there's change and then there's transformational change, and right, they're not like academically they're different, and part of it is that it's a time, right? Because transformational change doesn't happen in a day or a year,
Right.
years or maybe decades, right? Depending on what type of change you're talking about. But I think there could be some element of, but also realization, because I think with technology, and I'm a technology person, there's sort of an installation mindset. I put this in place, and then the value just magically happens, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's adoption. There's all built into business processes. There's culture. There's all these things that have to kind of come together to actually realize the value. And I just wonder if it's not being managed as a transformational change versus an incremental change, right? And you have to have the long view versus a short view, yeah. both from expectation of what you're going to get out, but also just basic investment strategy. Because I see, in my company, I see in other companies that we kind of look at our shoes when it comes to some of this stuff, and it's like, well, if we just do this, then silver bullet, magic's going to happen. But it's not that simple. It's a complex system and ecosystem that you're trying to change, and you can't really expect to happen overnight. And you sort of, you claim mission accomplished way too early, right. And then you lose the energy to continue the evolution, which is what it is. I mean, mm-hmm. You're really evolving the organization to a completely, not only new way of working, but different business model. And so I just wonder if there's an element of that in all of this, that we're not really, setting ourselves up for the long game in this, right. At least as individual firms.
And there I'd have to respond more anecdotally rather than rely on the survey results, right? We heard from one of our customers in the keynote, right? But if I reflect, and I'm sure my colleagues would probably bring up other examples, but if we see where we think we've seen success and that they're on a good path and managing to scale out at their digital efforts, then there's definitely a component where they're taking that long-term view. But then there's also a change management component. And in the case of it, didn't really necessarily come out when Gabriel was talking, but PwC is there to help manage that change, amongst other things, right? And so that whole process of making sure that they reap the benefits, prove that they're making progress, and then scale it out, what actually has worked, they work out what is the scale plan for that. So it's a very conscious effort to test everything as they go, but then they're managing the change as part of that process. And I would say, I'm thinking about 5-6 year journeys that we've been on with a number of other companies, like ThyssenKrupp would be another one, where we've kind of been working with them for years and gradually growing the solutions, looking at repeatable use cases across different divisions, for example. So each company thinks about it a little bit differently as well, depending on whether it's a lot of factories in the same industry, or if it's very different factories, right? Or it's services intensive business. So I think some great observations there. It's not as simple as looking at the data.
Yeah, we were trying to solve the problem with 4 slides, so
right.
There's one more there, I think. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mira Bodek from Deloitte's Smart Manufacturing practice. I had a question on this slide specifically, which is, I understand that it's illustrating there's a big disconnect between IT and OT on the most important criteria for cloud industry partners. But one thing that's interesting to me is, pretty much universally, 50% of operations professionals think all of these are important. I understand that it's a different 50%, but I'm curious why you guys think there hasn't been like a clear emerging lead, like a top 3 criteria in this specific case.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some more work on that analysis because I've noticed that as well, and I can't necessarily fully, other than it's almost self-fulfilling, right? You're targeting the factory audience, right? And 50% of the audience was deep in the OT space, and we did notice some differences in terms of the roles, right? So there was more people that were really, I'm not allowed to say lower level, but maybe, you know what I mean? It's kind of like they were the factory operators, not the VP of, there were VPs of manufacturing, but we had more of those people that were really working on the front line in factories, whereas in IT and OT, it was kind of more senior level splits.
I think what you should glean from this slide is primarily that there are needs that are different. So meaning that there's a view to it that you get from asking the same question to one group, and that's different from when you ask the same question to a different group, and that it's indicative of something that needs to be brought together. It may not be just technology; it may be a lot of other things too at that point.
And we've spent a lot of time talking about the role differences, right? But a lot of what we were really looking for was what did they need from a technology perspective. And it's interesting to see where IT and OT are not aligned, but that wasn't the central theme. This was not, we've got another report by another analyst, right, that focuses very narrowly on that IT-OT divide. We were really looking for more of, what are they looking for in terms of, are they actually investing in factory data models? Are they looking for, is there a protocol that they're gravitating towards? And the answer to the first one was yes. They see value in their partners helping them deliver factory data models. Yes, they would like to see an ecosystem of partners that supports that factory data model and IT-OT connectors, right? That comes out positively, maybe weighed stronger by one role than the other, but there's general alignment that they need that. Bad news is, no, there wasn't not a big surprise, I think, to anybody in the room. We all know there's too many protocols and not enough standardization there. So everyone is struggling with how do I overcome that challenge, right? And if there's anything we can do to support that, that was kind of what the feedback we were looking for. And that's a clear direction for us to really work with our partner ecosystem, because we work with almost every one of the industrial automation companies. They're using a lot of our edge technology, and there's a little bit in here in edge that I didn't really want to get into today, but there's quite a bit of insight on very specifically what applications or what workloads are they willing to move to the cloud and which ones are going to stay on the edge. And there's a few surprises in there, but I'll save that for you to read the report, right? Yes, there's somebody over on the left side here.
I just try to speak up. I'm on the side of the
Well, if you can hang on, because I think they film and record this, they won't catch you if you don't speak into the microphone. And I'm hard of hearing. I'm getting old, so.
Sure, yeah. Amol Busari with Wood. Just a follow-up comment to that question. We deliver a lot of IT/OT convergence initiatives for clients. I've been doing it for a while now. And one thing that I notice is the why always needs to be answered first, even before we go any further. And there is lack of support for justifying these initiatives. And there is lack of support in delivering ROI analysis for these initiatives. So that is an area where I would like to see more support for the clients for justifying and analyzing how it went.
And that's certainly something that I've got a couple of folks in the room that kind of work on that specifically, where they're really working with our customers to really help. They've got calculators, all sorts of things that really help with that that problem specifically, whether it's what is the benefit of moving workloads to the cloud, or more specifically, what return am I going to get if I actually automate certain things. So I think you should be able to get to some digital advisors within Microsoft. I don't know what they're called today. You know, like every company, we change those names all the time, but we do have some of those folks specifically targeted at how do we tackle this manufacturing justification problem. So if you see, do you want to stand up? You don't want to stand up? All right. But there's you see that guy with gray hair and glasses on his head just there? All right. Yeah, you'll see him at dinner tonight then go and chat to him if you want to kind of understand what we can help you with in terms of helping make those justifications. Thanks for the question. And I think we're at time, and I'm sure you're all going to be looking for us somewhere. We'll be around for the next couple of days, so don't have to squeeze your question in now. Thanks, everybody, for...
Thank you so much.